Okay, so today we're gonna water cool a system for my friend AJ. You guys have seen him on the live stream because my system, of course, waiting on some stuff that I was not expecting to have to order, as what typically goes. AJ says, oh no, I've got everything we'll ever need for this build, so we're gonna see if he's right or wrong. The new SkyTube mid-tower case from Montech features improved direct airflow with fine mesh intakes, 3 pre-installed RX120 ARGB fans, supports motherboards all the way up to EATX while supporting top-mounted 360 radiators, and even fits the largest 40 series GPUs on the market, all while not breaking the bank. To see the full list of features, follow the sponsored link in the description below. Okay, so here's what we got going on here. We're doing a rigid tube build on an 011 dynamic. That's okay, I can't fault the guy. It is like probably the easiest build to do water cooling in. This one has a bits power distribution block for the front. As you can see, we actually have to mod the case slightly to use this. We have to drill out some rivets so that this can mount to it. But this mounts to the front panel where most of the distribution blocks I've ever used have mounted to the motherboard panel. So this one will be a first for me. He's got a EVGA. At this point now, when he got it, he didn't know that this was about to be I don't want to say a relic, but definitely a one for the history books because you're not gonna be able to buy this anymore. But this is a Furtherwind 3 Hydrocopper 3080, so it's a pre-installed water block. I don't know how I messed this box up. How the heck? Okay, there we go. Pre-installed water block on there. Got a whole bunch of fittings. He got the JSUSense water block like back when it first came out, so this has been sitting in the box for a while. It's even got a lot of dirt on it. That's actually pre-installed dirt. Every JSUSense water block comes with the dirty box. EK Coolstream Classic SC360 rads. He got these direct from EK. They came from Slovenia. He was super shocked at how fast they actually came. Because I remember when he ordered these, he was like, oh my God, they come from Slovenia? That's gonna take forever. And 3 days later, DHL, here they are. I love the fact that they call these classic. Because the new rads, as you guys have seen with my build, have those covers on the end, which have a little bit of color to them. But he's got 2 360 rads. So, oh, this is slightly different too, because they have this like indentation on the side here, kind of a beveled. It's funny, the true classic technically shouldn't have had that at all. But anyway, full copper rad, we got 2 of those. We're gonna go with a bottom mount and a top mount. And then, let's see. Oh, in terms of fittings and stuff, he went with the Primo Chill SX revolvers. These are the same fittings I used for years, like in all the Skunkworks iterations had the revolvers. We got a whole bunch of XSPC elbows and 90-degree fittings and such. We got some light loop 120s to fill out some more fans. I think he currently has some light loops in his current system. Right now he's in the other room pulling out the CPU, which is gonna be a 9900 KS. Let's see. Motherboard is an EVGA Z390 Dark. So this is like already kind of like an EK tribute build. We've got 2 packs of Primo Chill 13mm. These are 13, right? They should be. 13mm, yes. Well, they call it 3/8 ID by 1/2 OD, which is funny because it's an American company. It is 13mm. So we've got everything we need here, at least we should need to get this done pretty simple. So we're just gonna kind of take you guys along for the ride, not really a tutorial, not really a fill montage, just sort of kind of talking about it as we go, which is what you guys like. So we got to start by getting the components ready. While he's pulling the CPU out, he's gonna have to reinstall it inside this motherboard. We'll get the block on here, get the case modded, and we'll do things in somewhat of a logical order. Okay, so I gotta drill out this rivet right here and this rivet right here, because on the back side, it won't allow the distro plate to sit flat. That's the only reason I would have to do that. Make sure you get all those metal shavings out of there. You know, I think Bits Power has really come out with some really nice stuff. Like they get these really nice machine screws, because that's supposed to be visible on the front. So these 3 will be mounting to 1, 2, 3 right there. The 2 that we just drilled out will go through just like that and mount into that side of the distro plate. So you have to drill those out, not only because it doesn't allow it to sit flat, but because we need it to mount it to it. So let's go ahead and use my iFixit. This is the big iFixit. This is let's face it, they're not just friends anymore. Screwdriver. Anyway, I'm trying not to touch the acrylic because it can scratch pretty easily and also gets a lot of fingerprints on there. They've got a tapered head that will fit perfectly in the hole that already exists in the case. See that? Don't over tighten. It's just acrylic. It will crack. So do not over tighten. Trust me, we get in our minds like, oh, it's gotta be so tight. But no, it doesn't. Just a little bit snug until you feel some resistance. Nice. I love stuff like this because this makes water cooling available to so many more people who might have otherwise never even tried, because this plate gives you so many options for cable, or not cable, but tube routing and stuff. That's why I was trying to do distro plates in mine, but the thing is, my distro plate on my build, it's more of a universal for the 925. So this one is very like specific height, layout and stuff. It gives you that super custom look without having to like go out and make it yourself. There we go, look at that. That looks pretty sick. I like it. I like it a lot. We're gonna take the lower drive cage, or drive brackets out, because we are gonna be putting a radiator down there. Do not see us using this back wall for the rad. That will just add extra complication that's not necessary. So our radiator will be down here pulling air in, updrafting to here, which will be another rad, exhausting. So it'll just be a nice updraft. Our inlet to the reservoir, fill reservoir, which is the tube, or the inlet's above the return line, which is nice. You can get all the air out so you don't have a waterfall effect there. And then this right here is just the drain. Okay, very well thought out. And then this is our RGB cable here, because there's side light RGB shining across it. And then we can just run this over here with the rest of our lighting, or the rest of our wire management, getting that up and out of the way. So this is the Z390 dartboard. He actually got it from me. Okay. I want to do a boot test to make sure everything's working. Keep these covers. They're important when you swap motherboards and stuff. You want to be able to cover them up. So I'm not going to actually mount down the CPU cooler. And I should be doing this technically with his 3080 as well. Because even with the water block on it, you can power it up. It'll passive cool just fine. I'm just going to let the weight of this cooler touch the CPU. Power. It's going to do a couple of restarts like this, which is normal. This amount of looping right now is not normal. Now, I'll show you guys what I saw and why I am doing this. See that one bent pin up here? So that's what I think we need to, I think that's what our culprit is right now. So let me protect everything here, and we'll take it over to the, the microscope. Okay, so this pin right here, you can see how that one's pushed down and it's like out of alignment. That's an easy fix right there. I do reckon that seems pretty close. Let me move over just a tiny bit more. Now you can't even tell which one it was by looking at it. That seems so impossible to do until you have a microscope. This is already paying for itself. All right, moment of truth. Or not. My power button not doing anything. Restart. Power cycle that again. There we go. One restart. Second restart. All right, couple things. One, this board is fine. I didn't need to fix that pin. It's a 9900KS, and this board needed a BIOS update to make it work. So as soon as I put a 9900K in there, it worked fine and it posted. The problem is, I just realized that this particular dark motherboard does not have any ARGB headers on it. This is about a generation before they started adding at least one of the 3-pin ARGB headers. So what that means is his RGB distro plate in there and all that would not have his GPU as well, would not have been able to have any RGB control. So I've gone ahead and upgraded his motherboard to the Maximus 11 Extreme that I had laying around. I keep at least one motherboard for every generation. I have several Z390s. So we're using that one. And right now you can see this flashing yellow light right here. Right now I'm doing a BIOS flashback on it. So the nice thing about the Asus boards and even that EVGA motherboard, BIOS flashback. So I don't have to have it posted and running to be able to update the BIOS. So it's updating right now. Then we'll get our bench test going, make sure everything's working. Then we can go forward with a rigid tube build. This is more important because imagine if we had dealt with all of this after putting all the tubes and everything in and having the CPU socket and everything move with a different motherboard means we'd be bending those tubes again. So it's important to make sure everything's working prior to even starting your rigid tube builds. So as soon as this is done, which will take a couple minutes, it should post for us. All right, the BIOS flashback is done. As you can see, we're posted in the BIOS. And for those of them I've been freaking out that the cooler is literally just sitting on top of the CPU, like it's idling at 27C. So there's your proof that it's fine right there. BIOS flashback is such an amazing tool when it works. So anyway, now we can move forward with the build. So we'll get the CPU block installed. I think maybe we'll just go this way instead of going sideways to make the fittings a little bit easier to access, only because of the fact the logo being sideways would totally trigger me. Had I, like, you know, there's always revisions to every product. So like if we do this again, I would probably make it so this top piece could maybe like logo-wise rotate in some way. That would be neat to have. But again, things you don't really think about until later. So now that we've got the BIOS updated, get this guy on there. There we go. And then remember, everything on my block is captive, so you don't have to put any standoffs or anything on there. It's just automatic. So take off the plastic piece. Intel's pre-installed. The AMD bracket, you would just pop this guy off, put the AMD bracket on. Again, all captive and pre-installed. Start in the opposite corners, just like you're putting on a wheel. Get everything started. Screw it down until it doesn't screw no more, because the threads are the exact length they need to be to get the proper tension on the CPU, but not too tight. Okay, so we're gonna use the DIMM.2 on this motherboard for the drives, which is kind of convenient because he had a Maximus Gene prior to this, so he wasn't expecting to be able to use it because we were supposed to use the EVGA board, so we took him out, but now we gotta put him back in. Anyway, before we do that, we're gonna get the motherboard installed. This is an EATX board. I don't know why I took those out, I don't need those. So it's going to overhang a little bit, but it doesn't look bad. So check it out. When I put it in there, and you see how I routed the RGB cable like under the bracket, around the backside and up through the top right there. So that'll be nice and cleanly hidden. To put this in there, you can see it overhangs here, but it's still even with like the opening right there. So although it's a little bit bigger than this case was really intended for, it'll be just fine. All right, so there we go. We got our motherboard in. I'm gonna go ahead and put the RAM in right now. I traded out his white sticks of RAM for black just because it'll look better in this build. The reason why I'm doing this now, and I'm gonna put in the DIMM.2, is because when we're doing our water loop run, we need to take all of these Z-axis height items into account. So this thing, if you're wondering what this is, that looks like RAM. It's got both of the SSDs on there, the NVMe's, see? And so it's a heat sink that provides cooling and such. And then it also makes it super easy to access if you need to ever get to them. So instead of having them being down here under tubing and stuff where it's super hard, they're right on here. So if you ever need to get to your drives, you ever want to upgrade them, see how easy that was? But we need to have all of this in mind when it comes to our loop layout. That way we're not interfering on anything. I'm gonna go ahead and get the graphics card on here because for the same reason I just described, being able to see everything that'll possibly interfere is gonna be important. So this is the Hydro Copper 3080, which he's a little more excited about just because of the fact that he's got a card now that not a lot of people will be able to have these days. Check that. So the EVGA cards have multiple port inlets and outlets on them, which is kind of nice. So he already took the back. He's been touching it. Look at that. He's been playing around with it. It's dirty. Anyway. All right. He's not going to be happy. This is sticking out past the side of the case. Open air test bench at this point. So, what would I do if it were me in this situation? I just wouldn't run the side panel, personally. So as with most things, we get 1 step forward and 2 steps back. So we actually had the vertical mount for the dynamic, 011 dynamic. The problem is the height of this graphics card, to get it high enough to clear the rad and the fan on the bottom, puts like the fittings right in front of the CPU. And I've even scooted it forward because there's 2 positions here. It can be farther back or forward. So I moved the riser forward. Anyway, so there's that. If I scoot it down 1, because it's the way it's designed to mount, then the radiator and the fans can't clear on the bottom, which kind of didn't even matter because here's another problem. The Bits Power front distribution plate and pump combo is just thick enough to where if you try and mount it like this, well, I'd say like this, 2 things happen. 1, the rad fits down here, right? Technically. But the holes for the mount that are in the bottom don't line up with the rad because it interferes here before going far enough forward. Even if that weren't a problem, you can see right here, this fitting will interfere with that potentially depending on how high. If we went with the 90, that's one thing, but depending on how high it is, the fittings he have, I guarantee, are gonna hit that. So that's unfortunate. Now, the only way we're gonna probably make this work now with the vertical mount is I'm gonna lower this back down 1, which will be fine, but means now I'm gonna have to either mount the radiator right here on this side, which those wires that I just zip tied up in there all nice and neat now are in the way. So I should be able to do that. Yes, that's lining up. I could do that and then have the fans on this side, but then you have this weird like 3 intakes there and 3 exhausts there. And how many fans do you have? 6. So you have no fans on the bottom, which would kind of be okay. But then I already started wiring managing this right here, so I would have to then put the fans on there and then squeeze all these fans. And then once the fans are there, it's gonna be very tight to try and get the 24 pin here and make this crazy turn back to the 24 pin because we have the wider EATX board on here. So we are just getting all kinds of, another thing that could potentially happen here is just not even running any fans on this rad at all and just let it be sort of a passive cooled and then leave the fans on the bottom. Potentially. Believe it or not, there's a lot of passive cooling in a rad, even with no fans moving over it. But this just leads to all sorts of complications. So I'm sort of feeling like the right thing to do here is go look and see which rads I have and see if I have a thick 360 and just put a 360 on top, intake fans on the bottom, and call it a day. Honestly, I think that might be the best way to do it. And then to make this area right here look neater, I would probably just take one of the magnetic fan filters for the exhaust right here and just set it right in there, just to close that off a little bit. So let me see what rads I have. And this kind of goes to show, no matter how much you pre-plan, and no matter how much you go with parts that are quote unquote designed for, et cetera, something always goes wrong. And I think I even started this video by saying, let's see if he's got everything he needs. He's like, oh, I got everything I need. All right, so update number 562. Got a fat radiator here. But the problem is, when you put it in here, once I put the fans on, it blocks the fill port. We might be able to, because this is gonna be the kind of reservoir that you have to use a squeeze bottle with anyway, with the little straw. So this might actually be okay, now that I think about it, because I got enough room to at least get my fingers in there, right? That's slid back as far as it can go. If it were like that, that's a problem. But I think we can actually use the Alpha Cool Rad. This will be plenty of cooling for the setup that we currently have. So I'm gonna get the fans mounted to that. The plug will be perfectly start starting to get stuff everywhere. I'm gonna move this down all the way to the bottom, as low as I can go, because I would rather just have this sitting, well, because the fans are there. So what we're probably gonna do now is lower this as low as we can get it with the fan sitting in there. And then we'll 3D print like maybe out of the TPU or something, just a little bumper that can hold the corner up against the cage of the fan. That way it's not sagging. And then with it being made out of TPU, it'll at least absorb some of that vibration because it's not solid. Well, it's solid, but it's more of a TPU plastic, so. All right, you guys wanted these long formats, you're getting it. So now we're about to get to the point where we can start bending some tubing. So as you can see here, I've got the bottom fans installed, mounted, cable managed. I had to cable manage all this first because it'd be hard to get to once the graphics card and stuff is in. Front panel connectors are in. RGB for the front panel is connected to the bottom already. I think it's right there, actually. Whatever, I forget. I digress. Okay, so before I put the graphics card in, I gotta plug in the bottom one down there, which will be easy once I remove that and I can get to it right there. Anyway, so here is what we decided. Like I said, I'm going with the 45 mil thick rad on top. This is gonna go up in here like this. I've gone ahead and put the plug in the front so that I can make sure it all clears just fine. But I'm noticing these two plugs right here, that port and that port, line up perfectly with the two ports on the radiator. So all I need are two 90 tubes to come down and plug straight into those, which is pretty convenient. That's obviously the return line, so that'll be the very last part of the loop. So this will be up in there like that. We'll have two tubes that come down, go across the bottom of the rad. So that'll be easy. I'll just take two tubes, do 90-degree bends on them, and then I'll trim each end until they get perfectly to the point to where they line up with their proper height so they're horizontal, and then those will be done. And as you can see, once this is in there, I can still technically get to the port. See that? That's pretty easy right there. So fill port is still accessible. That's not a problem. And then from there, once the top is in and plumbed, then I'll work my way down. These two ports right here are gonna be for the CPU. So they'll have to come, and then one will probably come up at an angle and over at an angle. So they'll like come out separately like that and come into here. And then these two right here, technically are for the graphics card. And since the graphics card is gonna be a vertical mount, like this, like I've already showed you, I'll have to get somewhat creative how we get to those. That won't be that big of a deal though, because I might do double 90s off of that. They'll just be straight lines. In terms of SAG support, now that and I'm not talking about the Screen Actors Guild. That was a bad joke, I know. I'm just gonna take this rubber block that comes with the case. I can't remember what this rubber block is for, but anyway, I'm just gonna trim it and then shove it right here. Because see, it's got a lot of flex. This movement that you're seeing, look at the metal back here. It's actually the metal flexing. See this whole back piece? So that'll just make me feel a lot better than knowing that's gonna be in there wobbling around. That way when he's getting it home and stuff, it's not moving all over the place. So, because this is a pretty heavy block. This is a heavy card. All right, I'll start working on that. We'll come back and show you the progress. All right, so there we go. The return line is in. So I had to use a spacer, which you can't even see up in there, and a double 45, not a double 45 like this, which is a swivel 45, or 90, 45, double swivel 90, whatever. Two 45s to space it down just enough to clear the fan, but also not interfere, well, it is touching the motherboard. So I tried to do that initially with a bend, and that just wasn't gonna work. So now you can see it's going straight in to there. So that, in my opinion, was gonna be the hardest one. As you can see, I've already pre-wired my 8-pin EPS, because if that wasn't in already, that would have been a pain in the butt. So the top rad is in, plugs are in, and then now I've already got the 90 bent right here. So I just need to trim this up to speed, or to size. That way it can come from there to there, and then we'll be good to go. And then I'll have to figure out the loop order. So technically it's gonna go up here, out of that, into the rad, cross flow, or not cross flow, but double pass, come back down, and that's where it's gonna return to there. So I figured that to personally be the hardest area of the build. Everything else should be fairly straightforward. But I had to use two of my fittings and my extender to make it work because, again, Mr. I have everything. Trust me. Like I said, my build is on hold because I didn't have everything. All right, so the top tubes are in there. As you can see, just a 90-degree bend right here. Technically, it's like a 91-degree bend because it's not perfectly flat coming out of the rad, so I had to match that bend to make this level, otherwise it would point down. And then that one already has the double fittings like I showed you, plus the extender just to line that one up. But that doesn't bother me because it's blocked. Like it's so far back up in there, you can't even see it. We've got the little rubber standoff piece down in there now. So now we can go ahead and vertically mount. Well, technically the GPU shouldn't go in yet, but I'm gonna do it anyway because I wanna test our little vertical mount because we need to do the, oh yeah, that's nice. We need to do the CPU next. But I guess I should go ahead and have the GPU in there just because of the fact that I need to make sure I'm not gonna interfere with the GPU when I'm doing any of that routing. So there we go. That's way more solid now. And then we still have to run these 3 cables through, 2 SATA cables because he has 2 SATA drives. We'll get this all figured out. I have a feeling I'm gonna use these 2 ports right here. The top part is done at least. That's the way that's gotta go. That can't be any different. All right, we'll come back with what the next update looks like. All right, so a lot has happened since the last take. I've got the tubing in. As you can see, these wires kind of suck right here. The nice thing is we can change these wires out later in the future if he gets extensions or whatever that looks nice. I actually had some Cable Mod Corsair cables for the AXI, HX, and RM, or RX, RM, whatever. They're power supplies. Unfortunately, it only had 2 8-pin PCI Express and not 3, so that didn't work. So it kind of bugs me that this is here, but this can be addressed in the future without messing up the loop. I still have to take the plastic off the graphics card. I'm a little triggered by the fact that these bends are not perfectly parallel. It's AJ's build, he says he's fine with it. It's at least contrasted by the fact that it's got the red wave right here, so this whole area, I guess, just kind of works. So that's it, the loop is done. I basically just have to do the drain down here now. He's got this drain, but if I go to screw it in, it hits on the fan. So technically I have to take the fan out to get this on there. Yeah, so there's that. And then I think we could technically just put a 90 on there so it points this way whenever we need the drain. Actually, will that even work without hitting the fan right there? Oh yeah, it will. Then we can fill it up and then I can still get to the wire right here. This pump reservoir combo actually comes with an adapter. You go from that to like a Molex or whatever, so I can actually do the filling and whatnot without having to run the actual system. And then I'll plug this back into the pump header on the motherboard. This motherboard has a header designed for high amp pumps. This DDC pump can pull a lot more amps than a fan will. But man, this, I'm telling you right now, it is 5:15 p.m. I started this at 10 a.m. There was a lot of things that kind of got in the way in this build, and AJ learned firsthand, like there is so many things that you probably thought you accounted for, but then you realize you didn't. I mean, this place is trashed right now. I went through quite a bit of tubing. My fittings right here on my pump, which I turned 90 degrees, as you can see now, are not my pump, on my block. They're slightly wider than the fittings here, so they look like they're going apart, but it doesn't look terrible. It really doesn't. Yeah, maybe I'm just telling myself that so I can go ahead and just finish this one up. I asked him if he's okay with this right here, and he was like, yes, before I even finished the sentence. Part of me thinks he just wants to be done. But yeah, so what I need to do now is get the drain figured out. I need to do the air test where I try and push air through here. There's actually a vacuum pump that you can buy that will pull vacuum through the system, and you can just watch the gauge to see if it leaks. That's how you'll know if you have any leaky fittings. One of these days I'll actually get one of those. They're very handy. You would just use any available port. I could use the drain port before I plug it up, to do that. Don't have one, maybe I'll need to do a video about that someday. So anyway, let me get the drain plug in here and then we'll get some video of it filling up as long as there's not leaking air anywhere. And then we can finally call this one done. Well, theoretically. He gets to install Windows on his own time back home. And then we still have to put the power supply in the back and his 2 drives, but this is the bulk of the build. Yes, all the cables are hanging out the back because, that part's easy versus everything else we've done. All right, we're ready to fill it. I've got everything wired in the backside. I've got, I have to power this through, okay, so we have the power plug, we're good there. I have the 24-pin unplugged, and I have the pump plugged in directly to a Molex connector that's gonna get power from the power supply. And then I already did my pressure test through the drain valve and did find that I forgot to put the O-ring on that fitting right there where the tube is, so that would have been a massive leak. Now it holds air, so now we get to do this. And this is where the squeezy bottles really come in handy because there's definitely no way to get a fitting and tubing right there. And this is just the clear fluid, but it is a premix. And don't squeeze it too hard, it'll come right back out the hole. All right, so I gotta stop right there. Now once I turn this on, I'm about to turn it back off pretty quickly because it's gonna pull all of that out pretty quick. All right, here we go. We got pretty good amount of fluid in there already. Pump is just moving very slow because it is a PWM pump that's not seeing PWM circuit. So the PWM pump, when you run it off a power supply and not something with a PWM sense or signal going, some pumps will go full speed when they don't sense PWM because they go, oh no, we don't see anything, so just in case, let's run full speed. Some pumps and their controller go slowest speed, and slowest speed is not enough to fill a system and get all the air out. So, but knowing that there was enough liquid in here to not overheat the system is actually booted right now. It says detect hard drive, which means it's sitting right now in the BIOS. We're gonna have to tell it which hard drive has the bootloader because it's a different motherboard. But we'll get the monitor and stuff hooked up here in a second. But there's no leaks. I'm just kind of moving the system around to try and get as much air. See all the air that just moved through the pump? So I'm just trying to get all the major air bubbles out. You just kind of move it in each direction, hold it there for 5 to 10 seconds until you stop seeing the air move. Just keep kind of moving around in different directions. This one's actually bleeding itself pretty quickly. So I'm gonna go ahead and top off the reservoir again and make sure the fill port is plugged when you do that. Otherwise, if you're too close to the top, you'll just leak it everywhere. And then over time, AJ will probably have to top this off too because there's still gonna be air in the blocks and the radiator and such that have to work their way out, which will make the level drop. But we should be able to get it drop quite a bit right now before he even leaves. So yeah, it's RGB on the front because it's hooked up to the motherboard and it has to be programmed. And same thing with the RAM that's in here. We gotta get to the desktop and get IQ to see all these new devices. That way it'll work. The graphics card won't light up, I don't think, until it sees Precision X because it actually controls itself software-wise through the PCIe. And I think, anyway, there's no RGB wires that come off of this card, so it's got to get its lighting from somewhere. All right, let's get a keyboard and mouse hooked up. Okay, there we are. We had to go in here and enable the DIMM.2 to be able to register the devices and make sure all of our drives are showing up. He has 4 drives total. 1, 2, 3, 4. One of them's nearly full, as he said. And all right, everything's good to go. So IQ is automatically rainbow puking. He's gonna have to go and change that, although he seemed excited about RGB puke. He's got to re-enable the front one now because in the BIOS, Aura automatically goes, and then once it goes into the OS, if there's nothing controlling it, the motherboard basically turns it off. It's just the weird way ASUS works. So AJ is definitely capable of doing that himself. So we were able to get the system up and running and not have to reinstall Windows, which is gonna be nice for him. And since it was the same chipset, same CPU, just an updated graphics card essentially, no weirdness should happen with the OS. So there we go. Too bad that's not RGBing at the moment. Let me go ahead and shut this down, put the side panels back on. And yeah, I think it should just go all white lighting. I think it would look really cool in there. But anyway, there you go. It is 6:40 p.m. I guess this, you know, I would say it didn't take me a year to build it. It just took me a year to find the time to do it for him. So anyway, anybody want me to build them a computer? Start putting in your applications now. I'm taking orders for 2025.